Hello everyone, it is Reese here. You join me for another reaction video, and for this video we are returning to the world of WhatCulture, and a video that I hope will be fun, and a video that I hope I can actually give some sort of degree of commentary to. And so this is an article from WhatCulture written by Jack Pooley. It's linked in the comment description below. The 20 most underrated horror movies ever. Horror as a genre, perhaps there's more than its share of underrated films, and the genre is held, unless it's some of the sort of the major films, in sort of a low cultural cachet. Um, so it's entirely believable. So it's fair to say some films have never been a fair shake from general viewers or critics. Um, so ludicrously underrated. Each of which still remains contentious. I'm wondering. So that it's talking here about movies that are sort of on original release. Um, Still only stuck in the underrated camp for now, at least. So not, I presume we're not going to see stuff like The Thing, which of course famously did incredibly poorly at the cinema when it was released, but now it's like a cult classic. Um, yeah, let's have a look. Let's have a look and see. And we begin the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. This is the reboot in 2003. Um, yes, as mystical. Who also helmed the Friday the 13th remake, which probably is one of the better films in the franchise, it must be said. And I think this is a good film. I genuinely, I think this is really good. They're doing different things, but the Arlie Ermey character in particular, is the sheriff, who also crops up in the sequel to this film, is I think this is genuinely one of the better films in the franchise. And depending on exactly what you're after, in your Texas Chainsaw films, there's a fair case to be made that this is potentially the better one, depending on what you're looking for. Um, but yes, no, sort of been as a classic at the time. In the Mouth of Madness, here we are as a classic. And sadly, one that we discuss a few days after the passing of Sam Neill. I like this. This is an excellent film. This is a John Carpenter film from '94. It's a kind of a meta narrative on reality. So it was a cosmic horror in which Neil is a insurance agent and he's looking for a missing author and essentially winds up trapped within the pages of the author's book, or does he? Um, this is a glorious horror film, and this is very much underrated. Neil is sort of the formidable leading man, and he's sort of the ultimate rational figure whose rationality is sort of brutally stripped away. Um, this is a very underrated 90s film, and very underrated in Carpenter's filmography as well. I would say it's one of his best films. Um, Again, I think if you've not watched this, I would highly, highly recommend. I very highly recommend. The Last Exorcism. Yes, so The Last Exorcism was kind of a victim of when it came out. Um, which is essentially in a wave of found footage horrors after the success of Paranormal Activity, a film about a essentially kind of, I believe one of them is something to do with disbelieving and faking. It's been a while since I've seen it, but I remember it doing something very different with the conceit. Um, yes, I mean I remember the ending, but I'm not going to go into it if people haven't seen it. But yes, I'm not normally a found footage sort of man. This is something that's come up a lot in, especially in my review my monthly review videos. Check those out if you've not seen. And this is one of the better ones. This one I really really like. I believe this is discussed in a few books on found footage as well. I again, I'm on board with this. I'm on board with this thus far. Like I say this, I'm setting myself up. Um, very much setting myself up, right? Um, Scream 3. I mean, to call this underrated is perhaps a stretch. Especially now in the era of sort of Scream 6 and Scream 7. Um, yeah, I feel like this is perhaps not underrated. So it was sort of for a long time considered the worst in the franchise. Um, Sort of going very much down the meta route in sort of murders happening on a film set, and the film is about the incident of the first film in real life. People always praise Parker Posey as the character playing sort of the Courtney Cox stand-in, um, and his charming cast. Cox Campbell and Arquette as the leads are brilliant as always. And Patrick Dempsey appears as a sort of a police officer who sort of may be interested in Sydney or not. Um, yeah, I agree. It's no longer the worst installment. I don't know. I'd agree with calling it an underrated pick. I think that might be a bit of a stretch. Idle hands. This is an underrated pick. Um, so a film about a stoner, Devon Sawa, who's kind of an underrated actor in the genre, really. And his hand is possessed. Um, it's a good fun role, and this is a good fun um sort of 90s teen horror. It's discussed in Alex West's excellent book on the 90s teen horror cycle. Um yeah, this is good fun, a silly premise. Um but one that sort of balances the sort of the silliness with genuine scenes of horror. Um recommended Resurrection. This one I do not know, so I can't comment too much. Again, I can't think of a single Rebecca Hall horror film that has particularly received the attention it fairly deserves. Um, but I can't go into it too much because this is not a film I know nor one I've seen. The Cell, yes, a sci-fi horror of the about 2000s. Um, Again, kind of suffered from sort of comparisons to The Matrix. Really. So Vincent D'Onofrio again is someone who's kind of a hidden hero of horror, especially in this period. Um, I can't go too much into it as I don't remember that much about it. It's very flashy, and I remember a lot of criticism about the flashiness, essentially saying it was all flash and no substance. Um, don't fully know if I agree with that. Black Christmas, again, underrated. Um, it's perhaps fair to say that it's not received sort of it's not hit the heights of Halloween or Friday the 13th or sort of the slashes that followed. And to call this underrated, I think is a stretch. Very much a stretch. So a sorority is being picked off by a killer, and then sort of in one of the famous things, the killer is inside the house. Um, yeah, and there's a lot of discussion about this, and to call it underrated, I fully I don't know I can be on board with that. The legacy of this film has very much lived on. Um, and it's hitting some things. There are sort of things about sort of gender politics, and violence there, sort of very prescient and sort of markedly better realised than some of the especially the 2019 on the nose feminist reboot of it. Um, I don't know. I can be on board with calling this underrated again. I think it's sort of the screen through thing, and the collector sort of is on the borderline of this show. See if I can read some of this picture. I cannot. So the collector, a film that started off as essentially kind of sort of in the world of Saw, is about a guy who breaks into a house, and there's a serial killer who's already broken in and wired it all with a bunch of torture traps. Um, Again, this is perhaps a victim of the fact it came out in the torture porn craze, popularized in part by Saw itself. Um, and this is a film that I think was meant to be a trilogy. A sequel came, but then there were sort of behind the scenes issues, so the third film hasn't appeared and may still appear. I don't know. But the antagonist of this is genuinely a threatening figure, and this is sort of a film that's doing with traps and such. Quite interesting things. Again, this is a good one. I think perhaps is fair to describe as underrated. Those who've seen it, myself included, would very much recommend. Um, so as above, so below. Again, another found footage and a found footage that I would actually rate. So 2014, and again, it sort of got lost in sort of just the wave of sludge that came in found footage. About a team of an archaeologist who is looking for the Philosopher's Stone, and they head into the underground of Paris. Um, the thing, yes, the film's esteem has blown up. The thing now, the film again essentially sort of vanished at the time, but it has become really popular now. So calling it underrated may not necessarily land just because it's sort of had a renaissance. in the past sort of 12 years, and especially in the past sort of 2, 3 years. Um, it's quite an effective found footage horror. Peter Weeks, who is the main character, the main archaeologist, again is a very, very strong male lead. It's sort of it's handy to have sort of an actual performer in these leads as opposed to sort of going for the sort of the natural, essentially cute rubbish. That sort of was in a lot of horror of that time, found footage horror. Halloween 3, again, underrated. It's very much stretching the definition of underrated as set out by its own thing. Films that remain in the right count for now, despite the fact they had poor critical receptions. Halloween 3 is generally now considered one of the better films of this franchise. Unless you're desperate for Michael Myers, so this is the only film that doesn't feature him. Instead, Tom Atkins is a doctor, I think, who is investigating what turns out to be a conspiracy to use Halloween masks to sort of cause drama. I think to kill a load of children on Halloween, if I remember right. It's really, really good. If it wasn't a Halloween film, this would essentially, I suspect, have sort of had a strong cult following anyway. But this is a film which is very well received and talked about now. And it's only really that it's positioned as a Halloween film that sort of makes it so divisive. And again, I'm not sure I'm on board with calling this underrated. I think there's a massive audience that very much rates this film. So I can't fully be on board with it. Cat people. Um, yeah, I can't do too much with this. I haven't seen this. I have seen the original, which is a grand film that very much uses essentially sort of implied horror, to incredible effects. But I can't offer any commentary on this one. The Strangers Prey at Night. Yeah. Well, I thought this was vaguely well received when it came out. After the Strangers trilogy that we've seen over the past few years, it's markedly it's markedly more positively discussed now. Yeah, the pool sequence is grand. It really is. Um, the film is a very different beast from the original to which it's compared. So that one was Home Invasion. This is kind of a slasher set sort of 80s aesthetic in a trailer park. They're two very different films. Personally, I prefer the sort of the approach of this one. But it's very much depends on sort of your sensibilities of horror. Um, Again, there's a lot of revulsion. The pool scene, which we clip here, is genuinely really, really good. Um, Especially now we've seen how low the strangers can go. I think this film, if you rewatch now, having seen any of the Rennie Harlin ones, I think it's you're going to perceive it markedly happier. Absentia. Um, I have not seen this. Why have I seen this? I feel like I vaguely remember something to do with sort of the nature of where people go or how they disappear in this one, but again, I don't remember it enough to be able to weigh in on it. And on Elm Street 2, so again, underrated. I think you'll be on board with this. Yeah, a film that's kind of been lost, because it kind of shifts. This is Freddy, perhaps as his darkest, perhaps arguably ignoring the sort of the demon version in New Nightmare. But a film that really now is discussed quite a lot. I say now, really, really discussed quite soon after it came out. For sort of the homoerotic subtext, a sort of quite a sort of heavy queer theme to this film. Um, that doesn't, I think, really manifest in any of the others, any of the other horrors. Um, yeah, I think the summary here is fair. That it's sort of there's more going on than it got credit for. Um, and again, sort of the Elm Street franchise is one where sort of the films became increasingly cartoonish and silly. And silly is not what you want for a franchise. But I think it's fair to say that in this case, yeah, this is probably one of the better Elm Streets, and there's a lot going on. The house that Jack built. Um, yeah, this is, oh God, it's a tough one. Um, underrated. This is, yeah, but the reason people haven't seen this film is because it's sort of deliberately isolating, as it were. Um, So a serial killer film, about a serial killer who's sort of built to be unpleasant with no real identification factor. And that's the point, right? Is that we're sort of not meant to find these killers in any way, sort of we're not meant to connect with them. But it's long and it's tough and it's quite kind of ambiguous in some of the scenes. Um, it's a film that will only appeal to a certain chunk of the audience, but if it does appeal, if it sounds like something that may appeal, run with it. Urban Legends, again, I don't know, underrated. So again, sort of in the wave of 90s slashers. And so after Scream and I Know What You Did Last Summer, the third attempt, based around a killer who inspired by urban legends, starring Alicia Witt and sort of an interesting cast. Oh, help me out, Jared Leto, isn't it? Robert Englund. What's her face? Rebecca Gayheart as well. Um, Yeah, I think it's quite a fun. So when I did my ranking of sort of 90s slashes, I placed this above I Know What You Did Last Summer, and I placed it above, I think, above some of the screams as well. I think this is a really, really fun film. There's an excellent sequence set in a radio station. I'm not going to say too much away, but it's sort of one of the sort of the top chase sequences, perhaps, of this cycle. Um, and I agree here. I think there's more you could do with this. There really is. And The Exorcist 3. Um, Yeah, again, underrated here. So, a film that is quite a different approach. Again, after the sort of the commercial and critical bomb that was Exorcist 2. But this film is broadly now spoken about as perhaps the best film in the franchise, other than the original. So George C. Scott is a police detective investigating some serial killings, and there are links to the original Possession. Um, And yeah, I think this film's talked about incredibly, incredibly well now. And it doesn't. It helps, of course, that sort of every other Exorcist film has been dreadful. Um, I think this is a film that again kind of has received a lot of attention, especially in recent years. Um, the famous jump scare as well that you mentioned. Yeah, again, I know I'd call this underrated. I think this is doing a lot, and I think it has been broadly recognised. Jennifer's Body is an example that perhaps, but perhaps because it's more recent, in comparison, so out in 2009, kind of yeah, a film that was not sold as what it actually was. And so it bombed and sort of it did really poorly commercially and critically. Um, yeah, and the film, so the film, Jennifer Fox's Megan Fox's Jennifer, sorry, is killed by a band who sort of uses a blood sacrifice, and she comes back and essentially sort of begins killing some of them. And Amanda Seyfried is in this as her friend, who kind of sort of tries to process this new version of Jennifer. Um, yeah, the film was sold as sort of some sort of essentially sexy Megan Fox and slasher, I think, and this is not what it is. I think the commentary here about kind of the sort of its relationship with things like consent, Me Too, really having that context as a more sort of popular point of discussion has really um, kind of changed how people understand the film. I think this is a fair one. It has very much received a revaluation. Maybe call it underrated is perhaps a stretch now, but um, yes, the point here is it is about a decade too early for that conversation. And lastly, Burnt Offerings. So we're going to end on one again that I don't really know anything about. So I'm going to have to end it there. I'm going to return to the start here. This is a sort of fascinating list of films that perhaps are genuinely underrated in terms of people not knowing them or discussing them. A mix of some that did poorly on their release because of how they were sold or because of the commercial landscape in which they sort of were released. Um, and so have only really been able to be sort of reconsidered, separated from that context, or indeed a selection of films that perhaps I don't fully agree with. I think perhaps have had the revaluation to their legacy and reputations. I don't know. But yes, this is I think there's a fair few here. There are some films that again I would have cast. So sort of the film I was expecting to see, I didn't throw out. Are things like Wishmaster, a sort of a gin horror that I think is sort of very underrated and very under discussed. Um, I think of I think of other horror films now, things essentially underrated. I'm sort of putting in the blanket of lesser known. And maybe this may not be the way to think about it. It's the way I've approached this, and I would love to hear your thoughts. What are underrated horror films that should be seen, discussed, sort of talked about more widely as proper horror classics? Love to hear your thoughts. Please do let me know, and please do like, subscribe, ring the bell so you know when a new video is coming. Thank you so much for watching. I will look forward to seeing you all in the next one.